changed my name. Oh, I might limp away, but I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. Say, I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. Say, I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. Today's my day. Today's my day. It's my day. And you've changed my name. You changed my name. I might limp away, but I'll never be the same. Say, I'll never be the same. 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 Say, I'll never be the same. 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 Say, our declaration is I'll never be the same. We'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. Lift your voice and cry. be the same. I'll never be the same. Oh, I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. Oh, I'll never be the same. 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 Oh, 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 I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. I'll never be the same. We'll never be the same. I'll never be the same.
So just as the song just said, you'll never be the same. So the way that you came in here today, you're not going to leave out the same. You're going to leave out here differently. You're going to leave out healed of trauma. So without further ado, my name is Marika Rogers. I am the visionary behind the Healing Gathering. But before I go any further, I wanted to allow the pastor of this house to come up, Pastor Brian for City of Light Church.
Hey, hey. How's everybody doing this evening? Great. I am so excited you all can be seated here for a moment. I'm so excited to be partnering with Marika, and it was, about 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, we had connected about this vision that she had, and when we began to talk, we started kind of conversing about how even City of Light over the last year and a half, we had kicked off a program called City of Light Wellness, where we care about people's mental health, their spiritual health, even their physical health, and how just in last December we were able to give away 300 wellness kits to folks all over the community that included jump ropes, water bottles, fitness mats, just a whole program that really helped to spur on positive mental health. So when we connected, we just knew that it was just a fit. We believe definitely something from God, because our hearts and our beliefs have similar mission and vision on seeing our city, our communities healed. And with that, there is something that City of Light Church is doing, an initiative called the Next Initiative. And that initiative has in large part to do with mental health, but even more specifically, the mental health of our youth and our teens. Anybody believe that that is important? So what I want us to do is just take a look just for about 2 minutes at this video at this time, and it'll tell you a little bit more about that.
You can count on not walking alone. City of Light walks with you as you walk with God. We believe not only that there is hope, but that hope moves with us. It lays footprints beside ours, holds our hand as we find good work to join and to start. Our hope has carried us across our city. It's marched with it when it's burned and poured water where there was fire. and planted seeds on the land. 5 years ago, we watched potential turn into purpose, and now purpose becomes practice. So what's next? What's next is we invest in leaders, young leaders who are finding their role, finding identity through friendship, mentorship, and service. We are ready to be their sounding board and support. We want to give them a space to think freely, to lay questions and find themselves in Christ. When we invest, we are investing in creating an atmosphere that strangers can call home. When we journey to hungry tables, your investment is the food on that plate. You affect the very carpet they step on, the chairs we worship in and learn from, creating a place where our family can bloom, where we cancel fear and fight faith, surrender to God, and finally say, we are ready for the unimaginable. We are ready for whatever.
So that is the next initiative. Does anybody else believe that our youth, our young people, are worth the investment? So we'll talk a little bit more about this later on as the other organizations, other great organizations are represented here tonight. But in your seat backs, there are these purplish cards. And if you get a chance, take a look at it and see some of the pieces that go into the next initiative. The first one, again, is investing in youth mental health. The second one is investing in youth safe spaces. We have some space here that we are going to be renovating for youth to come all throughout the week. And then the third is also community healing. So for these types of gatherings as well, being able to freshen up our space so that it continues to be more inviting for our community. So thanks so much, and I'm so excited about what I believe God is going to do in your lives tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Pastor Brian. Into the City of Light Church members, thank you so much for everything you all have done for the healing gatherings. Just so you all know, for the month of November as well as December, we will be here having the healing gathering. Next month will be specifically focused around youth, and then in December we'll be specifically focusing around grief and trauma. Now, I'm not just speaking on a loss of a loved one, because there's many different forms of grief, and so we're going to be addressing that. So please stay tuned. November date is November 6th, and December date is December 4th. So just so you all are aware of that. So far as these healing gatherings, the actual vision came to me back in 2019. And I wanted to do these gatherings on a smaller scale, which is what we're doing now. I did one a couple years ago on a much larger scale, but I wanted to do them monthly. But the pandemic hit, and of course we had to all shelter in and all that. So now we're able to, of course, with some restrictions, we're able to be in person with this type of gathering. So I'm so grateful and appreciative of this opportunity. But without further ado, I would like to bring up our first panelist. So everyone, please clap it up for Ms. Cheryl Hernandez. She is the CEO and founder of City Transformation Center. So first, I would like to allow her to take a seat wherever she'd like. And if you wanted to just, share with everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Cheryl Hernandez. My husband and I are the proud owners of City Transformation Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It is an agency that works with children and parents that have children in the foster care system. And so we provide parent education, we provide advocacy, and we also provide visitation. We have been in existence as an agency since 2017. Since then, we've probably seen close to 200 families. We have seen about 45% of those families that almost didn't have any hope to seeing their children return home. We've seen about 40 to 45% of those children return back into their, with their biological parents. And so, yeah, that's worthy to be acknowledged because, there's so much trauma that many of these families have experienced. And until they have a team that really is strength-based and really focus on the strengths and the ways that that family can thrive, we don't see reunification as often.
So my first question I have for Ms. Hernandez is, what was your first memory of trauma growing up?
The first memory that I have is when, at the death of my mother. My mother died in 1979. I was a little girl at that time, and she died in the home. I woke up to my brother screaming, and my mom, she was actually considered obese, and so back in 1979, there weren't a whole bunch of interventions, at least to the degree that they are now. And so typically when someone is deceased, there is a process of removing that body. Her process was a little different because of her size, and so she laid in the house with me and my brother for probably 6 or 7 hours before she was able to be removed. And unfortunately, the adults in our life didn't realize that they needed to maybe remove the children out of the home so that we could, not see the body, the decaying, and, because she was so heavy, some of the leakage in her body, from her body. And so we actually witnessed all of that.
Well, first, thank you so much for your transparency and sharing with us. First question that I have as a follow-up is, as a young lady, as a child, what did that do to you, that visual? Because I can't imagine that just erased out of your mind.
Unfortunately, I was numb, because I had to become emotionless to witness what was living the day before, breathless, voiceless, emotionless, because that was our crutch, me and my brother's crutch. And so, and the trauma, just continued from there because, we lived with our grandparent that nobody helped her grieve. Nobody helped her walk through her own trauma. And so we were the brunt of, a lot of what was not healed in her. And so as a little girl, I didn't realize how numb I had become until I had to face, some other situation in my own life. And then, God began to bring this up, because I think I suppressed the fact that I'm looking at this dead body. And I think there was a sort of guilt that came, and I know a lot of people that experience trauma experience guilt and don't realize it. Because I was so emotionless, I can remember sitting in my bedroom playing with my dolls as if it was a typical day. And so as I became an adult, I thought, what kind of human are you that you weren't crying, that, you moved on and played and do the things that a 9-year-old would do. So unfortunately, so it was a whole bunch of emotions and numbness that hit.
And so just as you continue to go into young adulthood and transforming into a woman, how did that impact you overall as you gradually went into womanhood?
I think just not wanting to be vulnerable, not wanting to show emotions. I think I put myself, I created a prison, a self-made prison, because I did not want to experience that pain. again, but then I didn't want to show emotions. I remember saying to myself, if I couldn't cry at my mother, at her death and even at her funeral, if I didn't cry for her, I would be doggone if anybody else made me cry. And so that was a really hard life to live because, you put yourself in a box and you almost dare somebody to make you cry. You dare yourself to love again or feel again. So it was a prison.
So the next question is, how would you compare trauma in your life? How would you compare trauma? We're live, you all. So hello, everyone who's watching us live. We're getting cues. So how would you compare trauma now compared to back then? Like how do you view trauma and how do you respond to trauma?
So, the person that I was then compared to now, I didn't understand trauma. And so, walking through life helped me to understand I was traumatized because I didn't know I was traumatized like many people until you experience wholeness or people that are free. And so, then, like I said, I think I was full of fear. I was shut up. I was isolated, and just that kind of person. And as I became a woman and really encountered, for me, the power of God, then I began to realize I don't have to be that person anymore. It's safe to be in relationships again. It's safe to love again. It's safe to, just be vulnerable again, because after the death of our mother and then living with an abusive grandmother, a verbally abusive grandmother, and other people in my life, I just didn't want to trust. And so trusting again was very, very difficult. And I think the thing that really challenged that is first my husband, but then my children, because what I realized is I could not be a better person to them. I repeated the cycle until I got healed. And so, unfortunately, we do that, but that's who I am today compared to what I was yesterday.
Absolutely. And that's very true what you just stated. If you have ever experienced trauma in your life, if you don't allow yourself to heal, to address those different traumas in your life, you will find yourself recycling those traumas. It may not look the same exact way each time, but it definitely will come up in your life in different areas of your life. So the next question is, how would you describe your healing journey now? And then can you tie it into how you are giving back to the community when it comes to your agency overall?
So my healing journey really is an everyday process because in every season of my life. So when I became a mother, there was a process of healing. When I became a wife, became a mother. When I became a grandmother, when I became a business owner. So every season of my life, I allowed God and I allowed myself to be healed. Relationships help heal me because when you're in relationships with people that are whole, or maybe people that did not experience what you experienced or walk through what you experienced and they came out on the other side, that was another process of healing for me. And how I give back to the community. My husband and I started City Transformation Center really because our lives were broken. We come from broken families, and we could just see that until there was just one that came into our life that really helped us see first the brokenness and then the willingness to do the work, because healing is work. Healing is work, and you don't always want to do the work. You don't always want to go back and deal with some of the trauma, some of the words. You don't always want to go back and confront unforgiveness and bitterness and all the things that hate and all the things that come up. And so what we did is, through our agency, is to become that one person that we needed to encounter as young children and a married couple of parents and grandparents. And so that's who we are to the families that we serve. Every single day, we're that safe place. We're that positive voice. We're that person that they can talk to, that couple that will, minister to them or give them what they need, to tell them that it'll be okay. Foster care and whatever else they're going through is hard, but there is another side. There is another side to it, and we don't tell them it's easy, but one step, one day, one breath at a time, you can get over it.
Absolutely. You said a key thing. So when it comes to addressing your traumas in your life and going through that healing journey, it can look a little ugly, like healing isn't pretty. The overall outcome is a beautiful experience, but overall that process, getting down deep and uprooting some things that maybe you've forgotten about, that's not always an easy thing. And that's also taking the time to look yourself in the mirror and being okay with who you see reflecting back at you. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Hernandez. Mr. Harris, please join me on the stage, sir. As he's making his way, you all give it up for Mr. Daniel Harris. I'm doing great, sir.
Good to see you. How's everybody feeling? Are y'all feeling all right? Let's give it up for our host for the phenomenal job she's doing. So proud of you. I feel like I've been involved in the success of this. I don't know why, but I'm happy to be here.
Well,
Yeah.
So I'm not sure who all was here last month. Okay, so I see a few hands out there. So you all already know what this brother over here brought last month. So awesomeness. I didn't know that when he was going to touch the mic that it was going to get real hot.
I apologize.
We don't know what's going to occur tonight, but nonetheless, we're going to proceed. Just so you all know that Daniel and DH, well, Daniel is DH, but he also has a band called The Next Level, so they are the featured band for the Healing Gathering. So give it up for them, please.
My brothers.
You want to acknowledge them?
Yes, we have Bruce Furlow on keys. We have Chris Finley Jr. on drums, and we have the gloved assassin, Mr. Michael Kelly, on lead guitar. I love those brothers, man. I get a chance to travel the country with them, ministering with them, sharing stages with them, and touching people's lives through music. So it's an honor and a privilege.
Awesome. So I see you repping your brand, so I'm going to let
Hello,
you talk.
you think I wasn't when I was?
Well, speak on it.
Well, I am the CEO of Out Here Serving Clothing, and the way that God gave me that was to create something that was of substance. So serving God, serving your community, and serving the purpose. That's what it's about, Out Here Serving.
All right. Awesome. Well, without further ado, we're just going to get started with the questions. So the first question for you, sir, is what is your first memory of trauma?
My first memory of trauma was I was about 4 or 5 years old. My memory goes back that far. And my father had a brother. My family trying to be careful how I'm sharing this, but my father's brother, one of them, he's one of 14, and one of his brothers was very active in the street life in Milwaukee. He was very well revered. He was a noticeable figure, and everywhere he went, people knew what type of time he was on, right? And every time I saw him, he was just very well-dressed, very well-spoken, very sharp, intelligent African-American man. And there was a transition in his life where he went from being a respected figure in the streets to succumbing to being addicted to the very substances that he was serving to other people. So it was a drastic change. And long story short, I remember my mother and him, my uncle, had a really good relationship. My uncle was a member of the Nation of Islam, but my mom was a Christian, but they got along very well, And he found himself in a situation where he had got shot over a bad transaction. And the first person that he called was not a person of the same faith. He called my mother first and said, "Tell my sister to come down here and pray for me." My mom goes down there, and I remember it. She goes down to the hospital, and she says, she's praying for him, praying that he recovers, praying for God's will to manifest. And then she asked him, she said, "Would you like to receive Christ as your Lord and Savior?" He was like, "Sis, basically, in so many words, I don't believe in that." My mother left. The next day, according to the information that we were given, he went in with, I believe, 3 bullet holes, and when they did the autopsy report, he wound up with 7. So what wound up happening was whoever shot him with the intention to kill him didn't do the job, and they found out where he was, and they went and finished the job. So at 4 or 5 years old, I'm dealing with a mother who was a minister, who was an educator, and I have to ask her questions like, "Ma, what is murder? What is revenge? What is that?" He was doing what? Selling what? Because I never saw it. My mother was very protective of us, so, those concepts of death and dying and what the street life had to offer was very apparent in that situation that I experienced with my uncle's murder.
Wow. Well, thank you for your transparency as well and sharing that with us. So how did this experience impact your life overall, going from being a 5-year-old boy and growing into being man?
I knew early on that I had a set of decisions that I needed to make for my life, very early on. I knew that the difference between light and darkness very early, because on one hand, my mother was instrumental in teaching us how to hear the voice of the Lord, how to pray that early, the importance of fasting, the importance of living by certain biblical principles. But then I had other elements on my dad's side that suggested, get it how you live. So very early on, I knew that there would come a time where I had to make a decision. And, in my mind, the way I processed it, was the more money you had, the more successful you were, right? And so at a very early age, which you are aware of, I left home very early and was active in the street between the ages of 13 and 14, was doing everything imaginable. We'll just see that, right? Yeah. You were there, so present in my life. Not there,
Hold
there,
on.
but I would say Marika at that time, even then, was the friend that was always trying to pull out the best of me, even when I saw the worst in myself. So that's what I mean by being there. But that's how it affected me. I started making decisions that were detrimental to me mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and many men find themselves in a position where they don't feel like they have anybody to turn to. I found myself in that space very early. And so what it caused was creating a lifestyle of erratic behavior, and I'll be transparent, everything from armed robbery to doing drugs to drinking that early, And for me, it led to a very downward spiral, being on the run from the Milwaukee Police Department and then actually being convicted of crimes to the point where I served 4 years in prison. So that's what it led to, understanding that, a certain set of decisions would lead me to success, but not knowing that it would lead me to pitfalls. Yeah.
Wow, thanks again for your transparency.
Absolutely.
So how would you compare trauma, how you view trauma then compared to now, and how do you tie that in with your healing journey? How is that going?
My healing journey, how I tie the perception of trauma now is certain things that I saw as normal were not supposed to be my normality, right? certain things that I became comfortable with, I didn't realize how toxic it was until I started healing. During my prayer time, even recently, the Holy Spirit said, it was my decision to create you to be a male. It is your responsibility to become a man. Everything that is within us, when God creates us, it's already there in order for us to experience true healing, true progression in our lives, mentally, physically, in every aspect. But it's important for us to take responsibility. There's a passage in the Bible that says, when I was a child, I thought as a child. I understood as a child. I reasoned as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. The putting away of childish things is also taking responsibility for your part in what you realize was toxic, right? And so I want to encourage all the men under the sound of my voice is if you want things to change, it has to start with you because we were the first to be created. So when it comes to relationships, when it comes to the structure of our communities, when it comes to our own personal mental health, it has to start with us because that's where God started. So it has to start with us because that's where God started. And so it's this time in my healing journey, this space in my healing journey where I realized, like, I am not who the system said that I was. They gave me a different identity. You knew me as Daniel, but when I got in trouble and began to partake in toxic behavior, they stripped away my identity, like they did with the slaves when they brought them here to America. My name was not Daniel Harris. It was 451547. That's what my name was. But the difference is, it's a big difference between what people call you and what you answer to. So what I'm answering to now in my healing journey is I'm called, I'm loved, I'm purposed. I am here on purpose and for a purpose. And I want to encourage every man, every male under the sound of my voice. You don't have to stay where you are. Where you are it's important because it's a part of your story. But you don't have to stay bound by your story. Your story doesn't have to be your prison. You have the key to open up that prison cell and say, I'm going to become something better. I'm going to become more than even what I could anticipate. And so that's been my mindset behind my own healing journey. I'm sorry, I started preaching.
No, you.
I'm so sorry.
This is what I mean when he get this mic. I don't know.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry.
So I have two questions.
Yes.
So you just shared a concept of being in your own prison, but you having the key to get out.
Yeah.
Can you please share how you made the decision to do that? And then I
Yes.
have another question after that.
Okay. There were, you know what? What's interesting, Marika, is that I didn't realize until later on in hindsight that I was locked up even before I went to prison. I was already in prison. I was in prison in my mind. I was in prison by the habits that were destroying me. I was already incarcerated within myself, and I didn't have no chains on at all. And so it wasn't until I actually got to prison that I experienced real freedom, because the Word of God, I'm getting excited, because it says, who the Son sets free is free indeed, right? So I experienced real freedom behind the walls. It took for me to be in solitary confinement, being in a cell for 23 hours a day, and not being able to have any human contact for me to really experience what freedom was. And that freedom came with my relationship with Christ. Because I had to tell him, like, God, you know what? I don't know how y'all pray. I talk to God just like I'm talking right now. God, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to be honest. I don't know what I'm doing. I have destroyed my life. But, I've seen you work in my mother's life. I've seen you work in my grandmother's life. But I need a personal relationship with you in order to overcome a lot of the mindsets and bad habits that brought me to this point. And so that freedom actually started with a physical incarceration. I needed to be there in hindsight. I didn't want to be there, but I needed to be there because I was moving too fast. I was moving way too fast. And I came home in 2007, and I never looked back, man. Yeah.
Come on, clap it up, y'all.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
That's huge, because in just all across the world, but I'm going to speak specifically about Milwaukee, recidivism is real. The turnaround rate back to prison, especially when it comes to an African American male. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but I know that they're relatively high.
It's 87% recidivism rate.
87%. And so you're part of that 13%.
That didn't go back.
Holding it down, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So my last question for you, Daniel, we often just hear about how men are not able to connect to their emotions. So a part of healing is allowing yourself to feel emotions because we are humans and we were created to feel. So let's talk about that, sir. How does a man, if they feel like they have to always have like this hard exterior all the time and they don't want anyone to know that they are hurt sometimes?
You know what is one of the key factors for me being able to get in touch with my emotions and allowing myself to feel the things that I feel is because I surround myself with wise women of God. I surround myself with people like Shalita, with Pastor Cheryl, with Marika, with Shantae, and Arius, and these are my sisters. And when I see their level of sensitivity just as a woman, it's like, you can't be hard all the time. Stop it. You got to relax. You can't do that all the time. It's a facade. And one thing about wearing a mask, even while we're in this pandemic, is that eventually you're going to have to pull that mask off to breathe, right? And so when you create that facade of false masculinity, it only stops you from really experiencing the fullness of your real masculinity. Because you can be comfortable in your own emotions and still not be deprived of your own manhood. If I need to cry, I don't care. I'm going to do an ugly one, too. I don't care. Oh, yeah, if I need to cry. And, you know, because for so long, I was known by the system for robbing people. But I didn't realize that I was robbing myself from the experience of being a human being. Like, I was robbing my own self. Like, and so now that I'm in a position where I am healing, I am growing, I'm progressing, I'm not ashamed to show my own emotions because I know that I'm not robbing myself of a human experience. You know? So if I want to show love, I'm going to show love. If I want to, you know, any emotion you could think of, I'm comfortable enough with that to demonstrate that and also be safe in my own manhood. And if you don't feel comfortable showing those emotions, I would like to encourage all of my brothers to find a place, find a friend, find, you know, hit me up. We could talk, you know. Yeah, let's chop it up because I know that that's not a real comfortable place for men to be in, but you cannot deprive yourself of your own human experience. Feeling emotions and feeling pain and feeling sadness, it's okay. You know, you have to be comfortable with that and also know that that doesn't take away from who you are as a man. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for sharing. Can you please, sir, you and the band, can y'all give us some music as we shift to the next phase?
Yes.
All right. Next Level Band. All right, so how did you all enjoy the first portion? So that was our community panelists. How y'all enjoy the first portion? And I wanted to just make note of the theme for this particular gathering. Today we are saying that trauma is not my name. My name isn't trauma. So I know that when everyone came in here today, I believe they may have received like a birth certificate. So you're probably like, what is the purpose of this, right? Well, guess what? We're going to cross out the name trauma, and we're going to put our real names on there. We're going to reclaim our identity on tonight. Is that okay? So that's the purpose of those birth certificates. So that will come a little bit later. But without further ado, we're going to begin with our clinician panelists. First, can y'all give it up for Miss Cheryl Daniels? So as she's coming, Mikhail is the CEO and founder of 414 Glow Inc., but I will give her an opportunity to share a little bit more about her agency. It should be. Yep. Testing. Yep, you good.
Hello, everyone. Y'all could do better than that. We healing tonight. Hello, everyone. Hello. So as Miss Dr. Marika Rogers said, my name is Mikhail Daniels, and I am the founder and CEO of Glow 414. Glow stands for Girls Learning to Become Outstanding Women. We will get into that a little bit after we speak, just to explain to you what Glow does, and how do we just participate and partner in when it becomes to the healing of trauma.
Okay, awesome. So without further ado, we're just going to jump right in with the questions. So if you don't mind just sharing from a clinical perspective how trauma impacts our young women within the community. You can tie it in with your agency and what you've been experiencing or hearing from the young ladies, or however you would like to flow with that.
I like that you asked that, because trauma impacts us on so many different levels. Trauma impacts us because it alters our true identity. A lot of people, it's like, I call trauma the ugly monster. It's this thing we don't talk about. It's the elephant in the room. It impacts us in a way where if it's altering who we're meant to be, who God has truly, when we came out of our mother's womb, when he blew breath inside of us, if you experience trauma, you begin to be stuck. You're stuck in that trauma place if you don't heal from it. So I see it with my youth, where in myself, because first you have to heal yourself. And as the previous panelist said, that is the ugly stuff. The trauma is unfortunate. It's so unfortunate that you experience trauma, but you talk about healing, that, and especially when you thought you was healed, especially when you thought that trauma did not impact you. So when you begin the process of healing, I was able to realize that I still experienced, that's how I knew. I remember when I was in school, the teacher wrote on the board examples of situations, and we had to say if those situations was traumatic and trauma, or was there just stressors. All of the things she said to me was stressors. When we got done and she revealed what trauma was, all of the things I thought were stressors was trauma. So not until that point where I realized that I have experienced trauma and I needed to heal. So how does trauma impact our young ladies? It keeps them stuck, because then we grow. We don't just stop there. We stop mentally there. However, we stop, and then if we're that young trauma person, we become the adult trauma person if we're not healing. So it impacts us, because then we're not going to be who we're supposed to be. It makes us feel as though we're not going to get over this situation. It makes us think that we are what they say. It made me think that I am not going to be anything because I was a teenage mom. It made me think that just because I grew up in 53206, I'm going to be whatever I was. It made me think that I was going to be a stripper or a drug dealer, everything that I was seeing around me that was in a trauma form. So when you ask me what does it do, it impacts you in a way where it alters who you are and who you're meant to be. You stay stuck in that mindset.
Well, can y'all just clap it up for the first answer? This mic is hot. So you said something that I want to just go back to. You made mention that sometimes you don't even know that trauma impacted you, or that you experienced a traumatic situation, because maybe the way that you were raised to just keep moving, keep pushing. It's all right. You'll be okay. Don't worry about it. I have to get this done. You have to get this done, but never taking the time out to say, how am I feeling today? Am I all right? This is what I do. I do this now. Little mental health check throughout the day. How am I doing? How am I feeling? Am I feeling a little bit on edge? Am I irritable? Am I happy? You know, it's okay to do that. And you don't have to, you can do this right now and no one will even know that you're doing it. It's that simple, just to do a check-in with yourself. So just wanted to throw that out there, the little nugget. Next question is, how has trauma tried to strip away the identity of young women? I know that you kind of touched on it. So do you have any, like, examples at all, specific examples?
Absolutely. How does it strips you? I touch based on it in the meaning of it strips you because it alters who you're supposed to be. I see every day girls walking through my doors, you know, and sometimes I have to go and pray, like, God, why did you give me this assignment so big where I have to impact? Our youth is our tomorrow's future. So how did you give me this assignment so big where I got to understand where they are and who they are and things like that? So when you ask me that, it stripped them of their identity in the sense they become their trauma. They become their diagnosis. They don't become the person who's diagnosed with depression. They become depression. So when they walk through my door, I have an ability to see anxiety all over them, depression all over them. A situation where one of my youth used to be a cutter. And I asked her before I understood what cutting was, are you trying to commit suicide? I didn't understand it. And she was like, no, I'm just trying to feel something. So trauma has damaged her in a way where she became that thing where now she's so numb. She's walking, she's just so numb that she just wanted to simply feel. So it stripped her of feeling. It strips her of feeling the importance of being who she is, the confidence she needed, the whatever she needed to just go on with life. It strips you from becoming and making you believe that you can become anything you want to be. So you told me to give you examples when these young ladies are walking through my door, and I'm telling you, close your eyes. Raise your hand if someone told you that you are nothing. You're going to be just like your father. You're going to be just like your mother. Raise your hand. It becomes them. It strips them of whatever imagination they had as a young girl. So when I'm telling you, if no one else told you, I'll be the first to let you know, if you want to be a teacher, you're going to be that teacher. I don't care what you went through. If you want to be a nurse, you're going to be that nurse. I don't care what you went through. If you want to save the world, you're going to save the world. I don't care what you've been through. So it comes to me with my real life examples. It's just the girls who come through my door, I see it all over them. And it's my job as a servant of God to begin the healing process so they can then get back to what they're supposed to be and their purpose in life.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned a few things, and this is not just specifically to the youth. This is just across the board. If you have a traumatic situation and you go unhealed for so long, it's just like having a baby. That baby's going to eventually turn into a toddler. The toddler's going to go into grade school, middle school, high school, and so on and so forth. They're going to become young adults. And that's exactly what that trauma does. But the only difference is it keeps you locked in at that age that trauma occurs. So if that trauma happened at 5 years old, 12 years old, 13, whatever age you throw it out there, that's where you go. That's where you go to when you feel defensive, or when someone comes at you or they treat you wrong, they hurt you. That 13-year-old side of you, version of you, should I say, comes out or go inward. Either way. And then you also mentioned that their identity becomes them. Or, I'm sorry, the diagnosis is what they become, opposed to their names, their true identity. And that's relevant for no matter what age it is, no matter what age a person is. You can see someone who just has depression over them. You can see someone who just has anxiety just over them. You can see it in their mannerisms. You know, I'm going to give an example. This is not across the board, so please don't start self-diagnosing and say Marika said that I have X, Y, and Z. Disclosure. But just as an example, if you see someone kind of walking in and they want to be off into the corner, they don't want to really be in the center where everyone else is at. They don't really want to interact with others. They stay away, right? They isolate themselves. Anxiety or depression could possibly be one of two of those things possibly that they're dealing with. So that's, just an example of like a visual. My next question is, what is the most common theme when it comes to trauma that you see in your office with the young ladies?
The most, and it's going to tie into something you mentioned that I do want to touch base on. that will be abandonment. I think a lot of us, we look for, I had stories where a person been through this or they've been through that. Being molested is really high. However, all of those things had a hidden agenda to it, and that hidden thing was abandonment. All of the experiences my youth share with me, or just me being, a therapist, and when I do adults, is abandonment. And what I want to touch base on is the abandonment issue. It can be something where it was the normal that where how I grew up for you to be in a single parent household and things like that. So then you start piggybacking off what you said. You start then when you are the grown version of you. We still all have that little girl and little boy inside of us. I talk to her all the time because when I catch myself, it wasn't until I remember 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago, where my uncle had passed away. So I hadn't seen my biological father in a while, holding some ill feelings with him, and I thought I was totally healed until me and him got into an encounter where we were going back and forth, and that little girl inside of me was all over there, where I cried the whole 12 hours back home like I got to heal. I have not healed, because when I look back, I was 13, I was 12, I was 9, all of that. I was not a grown woman talking to him the way I was talking to him. I was that hurt little girl. So when you say what's the most, it's abandonment. It's so many of my youth who go through, they're in adoption, they're in foster parents, they have to live with their grandma because maybe their parents are on drugs, or their father is not around, or their mother. I'm seeing that more and more now, where the mother's not around. So that is the most traumatic situation, because it carries you. It's like you lose a sense of your identity, because our parents is supposed to be our first role models. It's who we looked up to. It's where we go back from. So I would definitely say abandonment across the board.
Just want to pause. Does anyone have any questions for Mikhail at all, since she does work with young people? Any parents out there? Any social workers out there that have questions? Okay. Well, if you don't mind just kind of sharing a little bit more about your agency, if anyone wants to connect in, if they know some young people that could benefit from the services that you provide.
Thank you. And before I go into that, you also touched on something else where I want to just mention that as far as, and then he spoke on it too, the mask, and you mentioned checking in with yourself. We have to do that a lot. We have to do that more often, because sometimes the person who's the biggest cheerleader need a moment. If someone's always cheerful, they always that, you don't know what they're going through behind the door. We have to get in the habit of checking in with ourselves, because we wear that mask. I know I wear a mask, and I don't feel like Glow every day. I tell my girls that I don't feel like Glow every day. However, it's my calling, so I know when I open that door, God's going to put something inside of me that even if I don't feel like doing it, I'm going to get right in mode. However, we have to get in the habit of checking in with ourselves. I feel as though a lot of my youth are not, what we do in our organization, they're comfortable enough to begin, like when we built the report process, where they're beginning to talk more about it, but it's not enough openness. It's like a taboo topic, the trauma or the elephant in the room. No one wants to mention how Uncle such and such molested such and such, but if we spoke about that, and if it's not what goes on in my house stays in my house, then Uncle won't molest Brittany and this person and this person and this person. Now all of these generationals is going through trauma and trauma and trauma. So we have to get with ourselves to let ourselves know, like, that's not okay, and not be afraid to speak on that, to begin that healing process, because we're taught to sweep it. I don't know about how y'all grew up, but we're taught to not necessarily talk about certain things. What goes on in my house stays in my house, and I find myself saying that sometimes. However, we have to be careful of saying that, because we're teaching our youth at a young age that if something happens, shut up about it. Do not talk about it. Don't speak about it outside of these four walls. And you're lucky if you have a home where you can speak about it in these four walls. So we got to get in the habit of tuning in with ourselves and asking ourselves, are we really okay? When we walk across each other, we're asking, hey, sis, how you doing? Automatically, you're like, are you good? We have to be intentional of really asking, no, how are you really doing? I haven't seen you post in a while on social media. Are you sure you good? And being okay with that. So just to now go into what we do at Glow. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you got me. You're good.
Come on.
You make some of the things that you just stated actually had me thinking about a few things. So we know that we heard the statement, check on your strong friend, right? I would even take it a step further when it comes to, like, therapists. You know, as a clinician, you're a clinician. I know it's a few clinicians out in the audience and maybe even viewing right now. we need to check on each other. You know, the pandemic has put such a demand on the mental health field. I can't even fully put it into words. Pretty much everyone, they're to capacity with their caseload, where they have to waitlist individuals, and we don't want to do that. But we can only take on so many clients at a time as well to make sure we're providing adequate services and also making sure we take care of us. Because as a therapist, if you come see me and I'm not at my best, then you're not going to get the best services and not going to be able to continue on in your healing journey the way that you intended. So I just want to put that out there. And then also be understanding that we're human. We're human too, and life happens with us just as well, and trauma has no respect of person. We get traumatic experiences that happen in our life. I just experienced like 3-4 deaths this year. More recently, I just buried my auntie last week. 3 months before that was another auntie. A few months before that was an uncle. So we experience a lot of things as well, and so just understanding that, you know, if someone is not able to provide the services for you that particular day, or if they're full, that they're human as well. So.
Absolutely. Let me say one more. You know, when we get together, just one thing, and I promise I'm going to exit the stage. But that is so important that you said that, because not only do we have to give, we have to also, like, you know how you said, like, mention, we have to know that we're human too as therapists, but we have to give ourselves permission to not be okay. Because I know I battled that. Like, it was days I couldn't get out of the bed. You thought I was about to call my mom and let her know, I think I'm experiencing some depression. I didn't know how it looked. I read about it, but in a sense, I'm grateful for it. Because now when someone knocks on my door and they're on the other side and they're experiencing it, God put me through that. And if he got me out of it, he can get you through that as well and get you up out of that. And I can then speak their language. But we have to give ourselves permission to not be okay sometimes. As a therapist, I know for me, so I didn't know that at first. I just felt like I always had to be okay. So therefore, wearing that mask all the time and not stripping it to really ask myself if I'm okay, it broke me down where I couldn't help no one. How could you help someone? And vicarious trauma is very real. So how could you help someone if you're not giving yourself permission to be okay, to acknowledge you're not okay, so you then can heal, so you can then serve your purpose and heal others? Okay. So just to touch base on GLOW and what we do. Again, GLOW stands for Girls Learning to Become Outstanding Women. Our primary focus at GLOW is to assist with the social and emotional needs of our young ladies. And what we mean by that is, so many times our youth are told, like, what you got an attitude? I know I heard that a lot, because, girl, Jesus still working with me with my attitude. I will admit that, baby. But listen, so many times we're taught, like, what you got an attitude for now? Like, what you upset for? Don't be upset. Or if they're sharing what's wrong, is minimized. Or what you mad for? That ain't nothing to be mad for. So then they believe that they're not supposed to have anger, or they are displaying this behavior. Like, you know, if you ever met someone like, that's not like her. Okay, instead of talking about her, ask her what's going on. So those are the things we do. Instead of telling our youth that you can't be angry, you can't be upset, no, it's the behaviors that you do that cause the problem. So let's dig deep. Why? How many of us, by show of hands in this audience, how many of us sometimes wake up with an attitude and you don't even know what? Your day ain't even started. You're like, what do I even got an attitude for? Everything good? All of that. It's because we have all these bottled up things in us that we're not dealing with. It can be things that we have experienced when we were younger girls or younger men that we're not dealing with. So at GLOW, we dig deep. I want all of that, because I want every youth that walks through my building to be better than me, because you're going to learn how to heal much younger than I learned how to heal. So then you can stand on my shoulders, and then you're going to be able to pull the next generation up on your shoulders. So that is what we work on. Like, we're not just the cookie cutter version. We get ugly. It's some ugly, like he mentioned earlier, it's some ugly cries that go on. And then we also have fun, where we're building that confidence. We're now evidence-based, where if a girl goes through the GLOW program for 2 semesters, she will have an increase in confidence and a decrease in aggression.
We'll clap this up.
You know, sometimes you just do the work and you don't really realize that God really using you, you know. So with that being said, other than the social and emotionals, we just give them a place to be able to talk about it. So when grandma upset you, it's not that you are lashing out on grandma. You're able to communicate, hey, you made me feel this way. This is how you made me feel that way. And then confidence. That is a huge piece we work on, because if you have the confidence, it's just certain things you just ain't got time for. If you walk in a room with your head up high, it's just certain seats you're not even fit to sit next to. So we definitely work on that confidence piece. And like I said, I just pray that God continues to use me, because I want my youth to be better than me. I want them to stand on my shoulders. So I know through my healing process, it's so I can then teach them so they can begin to heal as well. And we hire on a mission base. So if you don't have, it used to be a time where I'll admit where my granddad was a pastor. So we used to hide when we were little kids when we wanted to go to church and stuff like that. But it was a time where I really didn't talk about, I knew God, I knew my relationship, but I really didn't talk about God when it came to Glow until he set me down. That's why I'm thankful for the pandemic. No, this is my calling. This is my purpose. And once I identified that and I owned that, and I said I will walk in any room, whether I feel like I deserve or not, it just took a whole nother level. So now, other than working on aggression, other than working on confidence, I'm here to assist the girls with healing as well, and not told to just pray about it like I was told. But no, you need to really heal, because I don't want the younger version of you to keep you stuck. You're not that trauma. You can be whatever it is you want to be. So that's what we work on at Glow.
Absolutely. Clap it up. So another great agency that's doing awesome things out in the community. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, all right. Come up. What's the age category for the young ladies?
Okay, so we currently service ages from 11 to 22. So it looks different because the conversations are different from my 11-year-olds to my 22-year-olds. So with the 11 to 15-year-olds, we're touching the surface. We're giving them the comfortability to feel as though they can talk about certain things in this safe place. And we're doing more activities where some of them don't even realize that they're healing and they're digging deep and things like that. And then for my middle-aged ones, from 16 to 17 and a half, we're really digging deep into that on the things that happened to you when you were younger, because I need that left side of your brain to begin to work so you are not going to be stuck at that place. We can begin to heal. And then my older adults, thank you, God, we just cut the ribbon earlier this year on our transitional living space, where we're teaching them independent skills as well as a living space where they're able to then utilize everything else that they learned from Glow, but then they can have somewhere they can live, where we're teaching them how to budget. We're teaching them about credit. We're teaching them, I didn't know growing up that you can own a house. So we're teaching them you can own a house. You can own it at 18. You don't got to wait till you 25. You don't got to wait till you 30. So that is the difference in ages and how we service them, all still helping them heal and work on social and emotional and confidence and things like that.
One more question. I would say if you don't feel comfortable with having a long, extended conversation, depending on your relationship with that individual, allow them to share however they feel led to. So I wouldn't try to start digging. I would let them lead the conversation. But at the conclusion of that, I would ask them if they taken the time to go and speak to someone. Like, do they need some assistance with connecting with, some type of outside services possibly. But I wouldn't take on a role like as a therapist or anything like that. Don't put that on you. But see if they wanted to take the next step to see someone. That would be my suggestion.
I really like that, and that's a perfect answer actually. Because I remember before, but going back to school to become a therapist, my undergrad is in social work. I remember going to see a therapist, and I remember my friend was like, "What, is you cuckoo or something? Like, what you going to see a therapist for?" Not understanding it. However, and then I remember I had another group of friends that was like, "Why are you paying somebody to talk to them? You can be paying us to talk to you can pay us if you just gonna do that." So to answer your question, based off her perfect answer, I would say just knowing, stay in your lane. Just know, definitely be that listening ear. Be authentic in asking. You know, sometimes we may have to check ourselves. Where, like, I remember doing I remember when I was doing my first internship, and my supervisor at the time, my clinician, asked me like, "How you doing?" You know, normally I'd be like, "I'm bubbly," you know, so I'm like, "Oh, I'm good." This time I was like, "I'm doing bad. Like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm this, I'm that. I'm going through this, I'm that." And she was like, "Whoa." I wasn't ready for that or whatever. "I hope you feel better," and walked away. You know, so we have to be authentic, and when we're asking people that, and if you're not authentic, then you don't even ask. Just be like, "What up?" and keep it moving. But if you are authentic, first, that's a self-check. If you are authentic, then coming to events like this, meeting with us, saying like, "Hey, I know that great thing." It's resourcing. Resource out. Stay in your lane, because you don't want to damage them more than what they are. Definitely listen to them, but then be authentic in your response to them. Like, "Oh, man, I heard of these things. I heard of that thing." So also what she said, have resources available for people.
And I would just say this also, because I hear this sometimes. Sometimes individuals feel like their counselors, this is not directed towards you, sir, at all, but I just want to speak on this. Sometimes individuals feel like they are counselors, or they call themselves therapists, but they don't have any clinical experience. I want to just say that is not true, because as a clinician, as a mental health therapist, a licensed mental health therapist, you're able to not only clinically diagnose, but also create treatment plans and provide additional services and walk with someone on a particular healing journey according to what they need. Someone can definitely sit down and speak to you like as a friend, a family member, or what have you, but that's totally different from a therapist. I hear that all the time. I'm sure you you hear that all the time, and it's kind of like, whoa, like, wait a minute. I went to school for how many years, and I'm just
After school,
yeah.
like,
So
what? Absolutely.
so I just wanted to make note of that. So thank you so much, Mikhail. Clap it up for Miss Mikhail. All right, Sid, make your way to the stage, sir. Mr. Cedric Del Horde.
How y'all doing? Only heard like 2 people. We're going to try that again. How y'all doing? Good, man, good. Other than being a therapist, I'm also a spoken word artist. So I guess this would be kind of an introduction into who I am and kind of the work I do. But I want to just share this poem with you entitled Untold Stories. You'll get a good picture of what this poem is about, but sometimes when we come across people, we have to consider and we have to remember that sometimes their why is bigger than their what. The what refers to the behaviors that we see. And many times we can judge people based on their what, but not have context into their why. Why they behave the way that they behave, why they think the way that they think. And I'm so thankful that we have a God that not only wants to transform our what, but really wants to heal our why. Amen? These are the stories of those who haven't got a chance to tell them on their own. The ones who feel like God didn't make them right. And hearing about their lives made me right, so it's only right that I tell their stories for them. His age is 13, and this is his story. All they see is my anger. But they don't realize that I seen my own mother get strangled. It's painful. I get labeled when my mind's been mangled. You expect me to respect authority when they don't see that it's more to me. Tell me to see my value, but look at what life afforded me. I learned that showing emotion costs me too much. So shutting down is what I can afford to be. No one's words ever rewarded me. The words only tell me that I'll be in prison where the wardens be. So why should I ever believe that God has more in store for me? These are the stories of those who haven't got a chance to tell them on their own. The ones who feel like God didn't make them right. And hearing about their lives made me right. So it's only right that I tell their stories for them. Her age is 15 and this is her story. Doctors label me with psychosis, but really I feel hopeless. I don't know how to cope this, so it's no wonder I find comfort in where the dope is. More medication by the doses got me thinking about overdosage. I keep hearing the voices, the pain exploits my choices. People say I'm weird, yet do they ever notice that I'm broken? That I had to dodge my father from all the alcohol bottles that were broken. So in this poem, I have to be the words to her sorrow that's never spoken. These are the stories of those who haven't got a chance to tell them on their own. The ones who feel like God didn't make them right. And hearing about their lives made me right. So it's only right that I tell their stories for them. Her age is 16, and this is her story. A man took away my innocence before I could ever spell innocent. So I guess that's the reason why my guard's been up ever since. To me, men are the opposite of heaven sent. All they do is to play you to get their own melody like I'm an instrument. So when it comes to trust, I'm ambivalent. I'm angry and I'm belligerent. They call me ghetto and ignorant. But what would happen if they considered that I was only 6? Violated by an incident, they never knew my predicament. No one wants to listen, but then they quick to say that I need deliverance. These are the stories of those who haven't got a chance to tell them on their own. The ones who feel like God didn't make them right. And hearing about their lives made me right. So it's only right that I tell their stories for them. So I speak for those that don't want to die, but their minds make them believe that they have to. Christ didn't have to die, but we believe that he had to. His love covers the pain from parents that said they can't believe that they had you. The comment shattered your belief, but please believe that God has you. He's changing your narrative just when the devil thought that he had you. See, when we realize that love becomes a nightlight that dispels the darkness of days to tell them that they are able to see in the midst of their darkest moments. What happens when for them, the DSM seems more truthful than our Bibles? When diagnosis determines their destiny, defers their dreams forever landing on its feet. When they ask, how can we be more than conquerors? When depression doesn't even allow us to conquer getting out of our beds, what happens? When people simply see their behavior but casually conceal the cause, just pause. People say prison cells are classic examples of bad karma. To me, prison cells tell stories of unaddressed trauma. Disoriented lives covered in orange uniforms, tried as adults but were overlooked as children. Disoriented limbic systems caught in prison systems. Why do we neglect the cause and only focus on the symptoms? See, these are the stories of kids who have been given quicksand, and then we get mad when they can't build sand castles. Maybe the problem that they weren't given the right tools to begin with. These are the stories of those who haven't got a chance to tell them on their own. The ones who feel like God didn't make them right. And hearing about their lives made me right, so it's only right that I tell their stories for them. And perhaps, before we try to rewrite their stories for them, maybe they just want to hear us say, we are here for you. Want to hear from you.
It's another brother who, when he touched the mic, it get real hot. Excellent said, as always.
Thank you.
So, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about what you do out in the community. We can hop into questions.
I can share. So, man, that poem, everything I said was based on true real-life stories, real-life clients that I had a chance of working with. I work at a place called Christian Life Counseling now, but a lot of the poem and what you heard Prior to my place of employment now, I was working at an inpatient hospital unit at Rogers Behavioral Health. And many of these teenagers would come to this hospital because they were deemed unsafe, which simply means that they had suicidal thoughts, suicidal attempts, heavy traumatic situations in their life. And really one of the ways I was able to connect with them was through poetry and allowing them to share their stories. So every story that you heard in that poem is real, of teens here in Milwaukee, living in our city. So it's incredibly real, just what our young people are going through. But I thank God for the opportunity just for me to be a small part in pouring into their lives.
So my first question is for you. Please share clinically how trauma has impacted young men and just your overall experience of working with the youth when it comes to mental health.
Absolutely. We've kind of heard a theme in every speaker today, this theme of identity and really how trauma impacts identity. I think in order to heal people with trauma, we have to, I think, reframe the idea of trauma. Something I always say is that trauma explains you, but it doesn't define you. It's an explanation of how you are, but it is not the definition of who you are. Biblically speaking, that goes even way back to the beginning of the time in Genesis, where the Bible says that humans, all of us, were created in the image of God. So if we were created in God's image, that automatically means we have worth, we have value, we have dignity, we have respect. The traumatic situations in our life might have distorted us, but they never define us, because that's truly not where our identity lies. Our identity lies first and foremost in how God created us to be. So I think it really starts with that. We've heard it before, but I think with young men, trauma really tries to distort their identity of who am I as a young man. Daniel talked a little bit about it earlier, but this false sense of masculinity. We really hear this word, toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is not to say that manhood in and of itself is toxic, but it's to say that the messages that men sometimes believe, the messages that men receive are toxic. Things like, as a man, I can't show emotion. As a man, I always have to be strong. I can never be weak. As a man, my manhood is connected to how many women I can get or how successful I am financially, materially. Those are some of the toxic messages that we hear and see. And that is what I see a lot in the young men, their identity, just trying to figure out, who am I? Am I good enough? Am I man enough? And I think sometimes when we do not feel good enough, we will try to go to things that fill that void. And that's what I see in a lot of the young men that I see and work with.
Can you think of any common themes when it comes to traumatic situations, like specifics for the young men that come across your office?
Yeah. I think one traumatic situation is just not having a father in their life. And we sometimes don't think that is trauma. We think trauma is always the big, heavy stuff. But it could really just be something, unfortunately, just like that. Didn't really have a father in my life. Didn't have someone that I could learn from and grow from. Didn't have someone to model for me an example of what it looks like to be a male. And that's really what I see a lot. Even if a father is not totally absent from the home, they might be absent emotionally, or they might be absent in just their connection with them. So a lot of young men, they are growing through life, and they are angry because they feel like they don't have a direction in their life. Even this week, I was talking to an older male, kind of in his 30s, a little older than me, and he was just talking about how he still feels like he doesn't have a direction because he never really felt like he got that direction from his father, right? So that is a traumatic situation. Even if it's not a big level T trauma, nevertheless it is. And then a lot of the other things that I see with young men have unfortunately been just violence, witnessing abuse, domestic violence, and even just seeing family members have substance abuse, and that's really impacted them as well.
So if you have young men in your office that experience some of those traumatic situations, how do you address those with them? Like, what are some of, I guess, like basic application of tools that they could apply?
Yeah, really great question. First thing I do with a lot of men, because, you know, a lot of us men, we try to be tough, act like nothing's wrong with us. I try to reframe this idea of vulnerability. I think Brene Brown, for my social workers and counselors, you probably heard that name, but I think she really does a good job of reframing vulnerability. She says vulnerability is really courage. So when you think of vulnerability, it has a negative connotation to it, but courage, it doesn't. All of us want to be courageous, but courage is really just vulnerability. So I really try to reframe that first and foremost. Like, hey, you coming in here, you being able to talk to a complete stranger right now, you being able to open up about your life, that is a sign of courage. That is a sign of strength. So I really start there with a lot of men. I'll get really nerdy and technical for a little bit, but I think it could be something that you could apply. So I would be considered what someone would call a CBT therapist. CBT is just short for this longer word, cognitive behavioral therapy. Essentially saying that there's a connection between our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. So if you think of a triangle, triangles have 3 points that are all connected with one another. It's really the same way with the part of us that thinks, part of us that feels things on an emotional level, and part of us that does, our response. So what I will do is I will really try to help young men or just my clients really understand that connection in their lives. Maybe because you responded this way because you really are thinking about this. It's really because you have this traveling narrative that has traveled with you for the majority of your life. And I think that traveling narrative for a lot of men is, I'm not good enough, right? So many times, people will come into therapy for their behaviors and for those emotions. Behaviors that they're not proud of, behaviors that they want to change, and emotions that they can't seem to control. But I think we sometimes have to go backwards and really tackle what are the narratives, what are the beliefs that you have been carrying with you. And if we can challenge those, if we can change those, then perhaps that can give you kind of the fortitude and foundation to change some of those emotions and change some of your behaviors.
Thank you for that. I know, oh, yes, clap it up. One of the things that I had mentioned last week was the lens, not last week, last month, was the lenses that trauma causes individuals to have. Like, you don't view life through a healed version of yourself or a healed version of others because you have the trauma lenses. And so some of the things that you kind of like just touched on, Cedric, was kind of like a correlation to that. You know, an individual who, if I'm in a place of brokenness and not being healed due to trauma, anything a person says to me, even if it's positive, if it's a compliment, I'm not gonna receive it. Oh, you look nice. I like your hair. Oh, I look all right. I don't even really like this outfit. You know, you get what I'm saying? So when you are healed, then you can receive that. Like, I know Mikhail kind of touched on this earlier today, that confidence make you walk different, think different, respond differently. So would you speak to that a little bit, Cedric, the lenses that the young men come through the door with?
Man, again, I'll get really nerdy technical. So in the psychology world, if you took a psychology class or you just heard this, you've heard of fight, flight, freeze. Anyone heard of that before? Okay, yeah. So fight, flight, freeze is really kind of a adrenaline traumatic response, right? So I'll give this example. So if a car is coming right at me, full speed, right? My body, my brain is going to respond in a way for me to either fight, flight, or freeze. Now, if a car is coming at me, I'm gonna try to run out of the way, right? I'm gonna try to flee the situation. However, the difference when it comes to a traumatic or anxiety-provoking situations is that sometimes our brains and bodies can't distinguish between a real danger versus a perceived danger, right? So if I'm a young man, and let's just say my traumatic situation is that I saw my father, when he was drunk, abuse alcohol, and he abused my mother, right? Let's just say that is a young man's circumstance growing up. Anytime I see a older male in authority, it might trigger me to what my father did to my mother. So I'm automatically always going to see you as a threat. Even if you love me, even if you're trying to get me to see things, even if you're trying to be in my life, because of that traumatic experience, I associate you with my father who I saw abuse my mother, right? That is kind of how trauma can be tethered in us if we are not careful, if we are not aware of how these connections happen to us. And like that's literally happened in my office. Some clients, especially young clients, they don't want to come to counseling willingly. they have to come because the court told them to, something within their school told them to. So many times young men will see me with resistance already. It's not this open thing like, oh, say it's cool. No, not at all, right? They're really having this defense. They still see me as a threat in their life. So really what I have to do is just kind of get down to their level, so to speak. Really be transparent about my life and my situations. Realize that, hey, I'm not just an expert telling you what to do in your life, but I'm simply a guide. When you think of guides are still along in the journey with you. Yeah, they might be ahead of you. Yeah, they might give you tools and information that you didn't know, but they are still in the journey with you. And really, that's what I really try to show my young males. But I think the traumatic thing and the association of these people are a threat to me, I definitely see that a lot.
For that. Any questions for Sed when it comes to the young man? Go ahead.
Yeah, so primarily like teenagers. So I would say the youngest that I really see is 12. So 12 on up is really the population that I serve.
Okay, we have two questions, so I'm just going to go down the row. So first, the young lady next to Mikhail, then we're going to go backwards.
Yes, I work at a place called Christian Life Counseling. So it's not my own private practice, but I provide counseling services, and including myself, there's about, let's say, 10 other therapists, all ranging in what populations that they work with. But Christian Life Counseling, located in Brookfield, Wisconsin, it's really on the cusp of like Mayfair Road, Capitol and 124th. So yeah, Christian Life Counseling, you can look it up. They do have a website.
Go ahead.
Yeah, shout out. That's actually my dad, y'all. So, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think parents, just some signs. If you just see your child and they're just more irritable, like even with little things, you ask them how their day is and they just snap off at you. You're like, what? Like I just asked you how your day was. So if you see if they're irritable, their mood is different just a little bit, or they just become really short with you, I think that could be a sign of, okay, something might be going on. Whether it's at school, whether it's something that they're feeling emotionally, just really paying attention to those cues. I think also a way, I tell parents a lot of this because some parents, they feel like, well, my child just doesn't open up. They just don't say anything. Instead of asking questions like, how was your day? Kind of like one word, answers where they can be like, oh, it's good, it's fine. Really asking open-ended questions. So what was your favorite part about today? Or what's something cool that you learned today? Tell me about one aspect of your day where you felt happy. Tell me something about your day where you felt challenged or you felt a little angry with. Kind of just asking those open-ended questions, allowing your child to really come to you and have the potential of being honest with you, I think are some key strategies.
One thing, I know it's one more question out there, but what you just stated, I wanted to just touch on. Sometimes our young people don't know how to express themselves when it comes to their emotions, so it's not necessarily that they don't want to open up to you. In some cases, it may just mean that they don't know how to express themselves. And adults, we can even say the same thing for ourselves. Sometimes we don't have the words to express how we feel. So cut the youth some slack. Don't think that they're being defiant all the time. They may very well just don't know how to really express themselves. And then there's one more question.
Absolutely, most definitely. Going back off of that scripture in the Bible, John chapter 8, verse 44, it says that the enemy is the father of lies. He masquerades pretending to be an angel of light. So if we think on a biblical spiritual level, and the primary way Satan, the enemy, will try to attack us, it's through our minds. How do we believe a lie? We first have to believe it. It first has to get in us, right? Kind of these narratives that I was talking about. That is the primary way the enemy will try to attack. And I think the Bible is clear on how we need to renew our minds in Christ, why we need the Holy Spirit to renew our minds. I think it definitely does go back to our spirit man. And hopefully as we are growing and maturing in our relationship with Christ, the Holy Spirit will begin to change things in us, renew us, right? So, yeah, Dad, I agree.
One more. I'm going to get to you, Shalita. Go ahead. Well, I believe the first thing is admitting that you need to heal. Because, identifying and acknowledgement of that is the very first step of even going down that road. But I would say I would not do it alone. That's one thing. So I would not suggest to anyone to go and start digging up old trauma, because that may just make things even worse, because you're going to relive it and not really have the necessary tools or support to walk you down that journey. So if you are in the position of saying, yes, I do need some help, I do need some assistance in this area, and I want to heal, I would definitely encourage an individual to connect with a professional therapist, and so that they'll be able to provide the necessary support.
Yeah, I agree. Ditto. I literally agree. The healing journey shouldn't just be an alone journey. And there are professionals who can help you along that journey. So by all means, for anyone, please don't treat yourself like you are your own island. You need people. Scripture in the Bible that says a nation falls with having a lack of advisors. We need community. We need people. We need clinicians. We need therapists, social workers. We need those people in order to help us move into the person and the identity that God has called us to.
And transparent moment, I'm a therapist, but I have a therapist. So although I have the clinical knowledge on how to go down the healing journey, I'm never going to do it alone. I'm always going to go to another professional, just like a doctor goes to another doctor. A surgeon can't do surgery on himself, so just want to put that out there. And then one more.
Yeah, a practical thing that I do, especially with young men who are really resistant, I'll just simply start with, what's your favorite song? Who's your favorite musical artist? And and that's kind of my art and writing, in me. But through that, they're realizing that their favorite artist, even if it might not be healthy, good content, they are sharing a part of themselves, right? They're sharing certain emotional parts about themselves, even if, again, it's not healthy or it's not the best. So I start with that and just kind of using that as a way of hey, if your favorite artist can share certain emotions about this topic, what's to say that you can't do that as well? And it kind of just opens it up and gives them a different perspective with that. Other thing I would say is, man, emotions, I don't want to say this. Emotions are not plagues. God has given us emotions to express. And if God created us with emotions, then that suggests that I think that we are man enough to feel and to address and navigate certain emotions, because those are God-given emotions. It's kind of the same thing with desires in our life. Desires aren't necessarily bad. All desires are God-given. However, the problem is that instead of going to God, we go to other things to feel those desires. I think it is really the same way with emotions. All emotions are God-given. I know this is kind of a tangent, but man, I just feel led to say this. There's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations, where Jeremiah is literally lamenting. Jeremiah chapter 3, the first 22 verses are literally just him being depressed. Things like, my peace has been stripped away from me. He has this line, it's very poetic, where it's like he's tasting gravel, right? That describing how he feels in his soul. But when he gets to the 23rd verse, is finally when he realizes that God can take care of his emotions. And I think that's really important for all of us, especially as believers, and especially within a church context, that emotions are not plagues. Emotions are God-given. And God, if he could allow Jeremiah to be completely honest with where he was, with how he felt, then God can certainly allow us to be honest about how we feel, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but that just kind of came to my head. But I think it is really reframing and really showing males that emotions are not a sign of being feminine. Emotions are not a sign of being weakness. Emotions are really God-given. And it's just for us to learn how to navigate those emotions healthily.
Well, y'all, can y'all please clap it up for Sid? And as he's leaving the stage, Abby, can you please join me on the stage? Abby Matthews. Clap it up. Another clinician. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, again, this is Abby Matthews. She is the owner of Holistic Collections. Connections.
Yeah, it's all right.
I'll let you share.
Yeah. First, let me just say, this is good. I hope you all brought something to take notes with, because I'm regretting that I didn't. This is such an honorable space to sit in with so many wonderful people that are promoting change in this community. And if you're not here standing in for yourself, I have to believe you're standing in proxy for someone else. My name is Abby Matthews, as Marika said. I've been in this community serving in a variety of different roles for about 15 years or so. More recently, excuse me, I'll gather myself. Credentialed as a licensed clinical social worker and founder of Holistic Connections. So many things that have been shared this evening tie together with a golden thread, and it's been so cool to see. I believe in founding Holistic Connections that there's some connections that people aren't making that are pivotal to their healing and to being restored. And those two primary ones, I believe, are the spiritual connection and the connection to the body. So Holistic Connections provides services for mentoring in the community, in a variety of community settings, but also interactive learning. I myself engage in interactive learning with young people, young adults, as we incorporate God's perfect design. So what I mean by that is our own bodies, our own systems, and also things in our environment, animals, particularly horses. I include in a lot of interactive activities, because we can learn through experiences and maybe address something that is really stressful that we shove down in a different setting and in a different way, even if we touch on the fringe of it for a little bit, to kind of start pulling that apart and seeing where some of those roots are. And so overall, that's our mission, is to promote the spirit and the soul and the body in terms of wellness and healing.
So let's kind of just dive in a little bit more when it comes to trauma and how it impacts the body. And this is going to be a perfect segue for my portion, and we're going to wrap it up and head on out. So, first, trauma when it comes to the body, can you just break it down from a clinical perspective? What are some ways that trauma shows up within our bodies?
Even before we go there, I just want to appreciate our system. Our system, just like our communities, it wants balance. It wants homeostasis. That's a word maybe going back to our high school science days, but it seeks to find balance. And when a traumatic event comes into our lives, whether directly or indirectly, if it's not a situation where our skill set or our resources can manage that, can react to that, and find some balance or stability, we will see some effects of the trauma. And so this goes for individuals. This also goes collectively as a community, right? And so what we'll often do, I'll go back to talking about our bodies, is we're designed for survival. You know, that's why we've been around as long as we have as people. And you look at animals, that's why some animals have been around as long as they have been, because they're hardwired to survive. And so when a traumatic event comes across our path, our bodies will start having some instinctual responses. Fight. We heard that tonight, right? Fight. Flee. Freeze is another one. And those are messages that we get internally, if we're able to listen to them, that'll help us to survive that situation. A difficult thing about that is sometimes we're not able to follow through with that instinctual response. Either the situation doesn't allow us to. So maybe our instinct is to run, but I'm trapped. Maybe I want to fight, but that isn't a safe thing for me to do. So I'm going against, or I'm having to go against, some of my instinctual response to survive. Sometimes we won't follow our instinctual response because for whatever reason, we don't either feel safe enough to do it or we just don't want to be seen in that way. So I don't want to flee because I don't want to look scared of something. So you know what? I'm scared to death right now, even my survival at that level, but I'm going to sit here. Because physically, I'll show you that I can be present, but internally, in my soul, and in my body, everything in me is already gone. So you have a conflict. And these conflicts are oftentimes where you see mental health symptoms. That's where you often see signs of trauma, because your body still had that experience of wanting to go and do something to protect itself. We didn't allow it to happen. So I just wanted to give that foundation a little bit, because when you ask me the question, how do we see trauma show up in our bodies? Sometimes it's that ache in our neck that we've carried with us for 5 years, or my digestive concerns, because our stomachs, they're a good gauge for our mental health and how we're feeling too. This connection right here is a very strong alignment. And so we have to switch our perspective. And this goes for our communities too. I'll zoom out for a minute. What's wrong with this community? What's wrong with my body? Those stories or those questions that we're asking, they have to shift to what happened. What's happened in this community
what's happened in my life to where I'm noticing this? And what is it saying to me? What's it saying to me? Because I don't think any of us really wake up in the morning and we say, you know what, I don't really have much to do. I think I'm going to do a whole 180 in my life. And I'm going to just scratch everything I've done up until this point, and I'm going to do this big life change. Why not, you know? Oftentimes we change because we can't continue down the same path that we've been on. This goes for communities. This goes for ourselves. Change must happen. And so we pause to notice that, and that's our motivation, right? And so maybe I got off on a little tangent myself, but I was so activated by some things that people shared throughout the evening. And for me, activation, that word also means it's a clue into how we feel trauma in our bodies too. So some people call it triggered. I like to think of it as activation because there's a whole sequence of events that happens. So I'm not going to ask you to say this out loud, but I want you to think to yourself, in our communities, recall in your mind just for a moment, start listing some things that you feel like have been a traumatic impact on a community that you're either in now or at some point in your life. And I'm purposely doing this in a safe space because we're here now. We're not there. But I want you to notice if you feel any kind of activation inside of you. Did your heart start beating a little faster? Did your breath change? And feelings will accompany these things also, right? And so it's that level of reflection and processing that needs to happen in trauma work too, or any kind of work, stress work, anxiety work, depression. Our bodies are here as a resource for us. And so if we are only going by what we're thinking and moving about our days in a survivalist kind of a way, not so much trying to escape traumatic events, but just getting by moment for moment, we're not only missing a huge resource that can help us, we're neglecting a whole channel of information that's here to keep us safe and that is also here to promote healing too.
Okay, thank you for that. Another perspective that I have when it comes to trauma and how it impacts our bodies, like you were saying, like the aching, your back or your shoulder, anxiety, like you were saying, it impacts our stomach or our digestive system. Sometimes trauma does cause anxiety, and anxiety can cause your appetite to decrease. It can cause you to feel like nauseated within your stomach. It can cause your sleeping patterns to be off. You can't sleep, or even tying in depression can be an outcome from trauma where you're isolating yourself or you're sleeping more. Just speaking about other ways in which trauma shows up within our bodies.
Yeah, and you touched on some good points, and I think another level to this is that when we have experienced traumatic events, our body, our mind and our body, our brain, our actual, there's so much neuroscience out there. If you're interested, read up on it, because there's certain systems within our bodies. We'll take the brain, for example. It's hardwired to sound an alarm internally to say, this is a threat, this is an emergency, this is what needs to happen, like I was talking about, our instinctual responses. When we've experienced traumatic events, especially layered trauma, chronic trauma that may have started before we've even born, generational trauma, right? Developmental trauma, our system begins to adapt to survive, much like it has for those experiences that we've developed time and time again. And so, because we've adapted that way, we might come across a stressor that's less significant. Maybe it's just you missed the bus for work and you know all the consequences that are coming after that, but your system has become so hardwired for stress that it gets that bigger response, like it may have when that really big thing was happening. And so it's the chronicity of it. It's having this system that is hardwired to manage stress for time and years, and it gets tired. It not only gets tired, and that's over time why you see life expectancy is actually less as well for certain mental health diagnoses, because our systems, our heart, the organs that we have, our blood pressure, I could go on, and even some diabetes, because there's some comfort, in the way we've adapted our lifestyle to manage stress. That's how we see trauma play out too. Because, again, everything now is trauma. Like you mentioned, the perspective becomes trauma. So now it's not only in our minds as we think about our identity, it's our physiological responses in our body. So this might be responses that you're not even aware of that you're having. Because a lot of these processes, just like you don't tell yourself to breathe, you don't tell your heart to beat, your body is operating. It's doing this for you. So it's on that level too. So thank you for adding to that.
Absolutely. And just a reminder, the theme of this gathering is My Name Isn't Trauma. And so we're focusing on taking our identity back. And I mentioned this last month, and I think that it ties in well with what we're discussing right now. Sometimes we have different illnesses and diagnoses that come out of nowhere. But it's because we're carrying that trauma in our body for so long, that those stressors, those triggers, that you name it, that's connected to that trauma, we're carrying that around. And that trauma, our bodies have become the house of trauma. Where we're supposed to, making sure that we are whole and healthy and all of these different things. But trauma causes us to emotionally eat, oversleep, eat junk food, all these different things. And so as a result of it, it may be diabetes, high blood pressure, you name it. And it's connected, the beginning phases of that was trauma. If you are in a position where you can be healed and work on your healing, what if diabetes go away? What if high blood pressure goes away? What if you name it goes away? That's how important mental and emotional health is, because if we're not right here in here, our whole body is imbalanced. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care what neighborhood you're in. You're not safe in your own body if your mind ain't right and if your heart ain't right. Does anyone have any questions for Abby or myself regarding trauma in the body at all? Go ahead.
That's good. And I think...
Can we repeat the question? I'm
sorry. The question is what can we do in the moment if we find ourselves triggered or activated by what's happening around us or having some of that response? We really underestimate the power of our breath. And I know you hear people saying either count to 10 or take a deep breath. We don't always understand why that works. And so there are systems in place, again, internally. Our ventral vagal system and our polyvagal, if you want to read up on that, that's amazing stuff to dig into. I won't bore you with it, but if this is anything of interest to you, read that. It's good. Taking a deep breath not only gives you that input of that oxygen, but it connects you in the moment. It's like an internal massage for everything coming from here to here. So we take a deep breath, draw it out, Remind yourself that you're here in this moment. Your feet are on the floor. Your back is against that seat back if that's where you're at. The simplest things, slow everything down, and just see if you can notice what is happening so that you don't feel like it's a runaway train and you're just trying to stay on it. And the other thing you could do is, even if you notice that there's a part of you that is really activated and staying with that is too much to notice, then maybe try to think of a place that's an opposite feeling. You know, it's a really cool journey to do, but it's foreign at first, is to start noticing and naming the sensations that you're feeling in your body. Well, this feels kind of prickly, or, you know, this feels warm, or this doesn't feel good. It feels kind of nauseous, or whatever it might be. There's some movement here. How would you describe that? Well, I'm not sure. But the more you can kind of be curious about that, not only will it lessen naturally, and it will, because before I came up here, my heart was beating. God's working with me right now too, everybody. You know, he put me on a mission to help people, but, you know, I'm kind of like Moses. And I'm going to step out here with his strength and courage that he's guided me to have. But the more I hear that heart beating, and I notice it, and I don't focus on anything else, I guarantee you my heart's beating slower. And so I invite you to try some of this. Try it when you're not experiencing something super stressful. But if you notice the irritation even just come up, pause for a minute and go in. And see not only if you notice something, but try to put some kind of description to it, even in your own mind. You don't have to share with anybody. Because I know we said this last month when we met, and I'll say it now as well. The more you can identify something and notice it, the more you have some powers to work through it and to move forward with it. And so I love the name of this series and today. If your name is not trauma, what is it? What is it? Because you might leave here today and you might know, you know, well, my name isn't trauma, and I'm walking out of here and I'm stronger than I've ever been. God bless your path and everyone that comes across it. But you may leave out here with just a question mark, and that's great too. I'm not walking out here the same way I came in, but how am I walking out? You know, and I'll go to nature for a second. I don't want to stay before you too long. If you think about the caterpillar that goes into the cocoon and comes out as a butterfly, right? That caterpillar doesn't need to know that whole journey and doesn't know what it's going to look like along the way. It just takes steps along the way. And I've actually read up on this recently. I like to do some reading about weird things. There's a moment in the cocoon that caterpillar, you couldn't identify it in any way possible. It breaks down almost, like 99.9% of it breaks down, even internally, to where you couldn't even recognize it scientifically as a caterpillar, and comes out in a whole new way transformed. And so that journey, right, is a beautiful thing to look to. Again, one of God's natural processes that we can look to as we think about a journey. You know. So what does your change look like? If it's not that, then what is it? And so if you leave here even just being curious, then that's a great first step also.
Oh, I see you, sir. Go ahead. Honestly, I would say being in spaces such as these and going out and telling others to be a part, I would say that would be one of the first steps that I would do. There's a saying, you can't heal in the same environment that you were hurt in. So being out here in these streets on whatever street name you want to throw out there that was traumatic for someone isn't going to work. Coming into safe spaces such as these will be the change. And the fact of the matter is we cannot change what happens to us, but we can change how we respond to it. Trauma is inevitable. Just because we here today doesn't mean trauma is not going to try to hit your life tomorrow or when you walk out the door. This is just to provide some tools so that if it does or when it does occur in your life, you don't respond the same way and you don't take it all in and house trauma anymore because you're too healed to even allow that to come in. So that's what I would say as far as the community. I agree with you, and that's the whole reason why I wanted to do these type of gatherings for the community. Hopefully more individuals will start coming. I understand it's a pandemic. Some people are not comfortable, so hopefully there's many that's watching right now.
Yeah, I agree with you, and if I could add to that, and there's so many parallels between our own responses to trauma and a community's responses to trauma, and then how you heal from that. And so if I think about people, and again, this is relevant for communities, when trauma hits, we often do what we need to do or hopefully can do to feel safe. And oftentimes that means compartmentalizing. Sometimes it also means isolating. And so what happened in a moment to maybe stay safe or get through a situation, if that becomes chronic, like I mentioned before, that's when the problem continues to persist and grow. The same is true for communities. You know, if situations have come up in communities and there hasn't been a collective holding space for that, talking about people's experiences, but it's kind of a moving through business as usual, or people kind of carrying on in their own experience, this problem is only going to grow more and more. So that might be why you see that. It doesn't seem like people know how much trauma is in our community, because there's compartmentalization. And so going off of that, I would say coming together, like you said, events like this. Now, if you came here and you're going to leave different, my hope is that we go back into our communities and we offer some of that light and we come different in our communities. So not only for yourself, but what's your action step after today? Because we've been here for a lot of time and we're talking about some really good things. But if we just sit here and talk about it and we don't go out those doors and do something about it in our walk, what are we really doing? So yes, we have to do our own work, but we also need to come as a community, because the same way communities are impacted by trauma, they can heal collectively also. So community listening sessions are huge. Let's not underestimate, again, the power of the simplest things. Having a conversation, maybe with the neighbor over there, smiling over there and just saying, hey, good morning, to the neighbor as you're walking to go get your mail. You know, that's where sometimes it has to start. And we've lost that. We've lost that in so many ways. Not only generationally, but particularly in this community, because of a lot of the trauma that's happening as well.
Go ahead, sir.
Absolutely, yeah.
Go ahead.
And I think for all the reasons that everybody that's been on this stage is talking about, and some of your points as well, when we have an imbalance in our soul, I believe that's where we get those psychological conditions as well. And so we'll see things like depression, we'll see things like anxiety, post-traumatic stress syndrome, any kind of stress disorder. You know, I'm not trying to knock disorders, because in some ways it helps us to have a shared language to describe people's situations or what they're experiencing. But on another hand, it's very tricky, because then, like we mentioned, that can become your identity. This is me, right? I am this depression, I am this anxiety. And so I agree what you're saying. Yes, it is. You know, it is. It can be a psychological disorder, but I think it's a framework to describe your current state, or a state that you're not happy with, so you can, or it's causing some challenges in your life, and that you feel like have to be addressed and have to be changed in order to move through that.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for sure.
I 100% agree. So again, a big shout out to Pastor Brian and the City of Light Church for partnering. Thank you so much, Abby.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for having me, and just to piggyback on what you said, that's why the name is Holistic Connections, because we take that approach, not the trendy version of holistic, but the soul, the spirit, and the body. And we'll be hanging out around afterwards, too, if anybody has questions later. But thank you.
So now it's my time, y'all. It's my time to talk. I ain't gonna hold y'all long. We in church, but I'm serious about that. I'm really big on time. So, my focus now is forgiveness. And I'm gonna first speak to you all about the power of forgiveness and how forgiveness can not only free you mentally and emotionally, but also it can free you within your body. Forgiving someone can actually decrease that anxiety and or eliminate it possibly. It can decrease that depression and or alleviate it possibly. Forgiveness can also relieve you and deliver you from whatever disease you can put out there. Heart issues, diabetes, high blood pressure, X, Y, and Z. Forgiveness can do so much for you because we know that stress is one of the number one killers. And stress is connected to trauma. It can cause stress on the heart when you're dealing with so much trauma. And so I wanted to just walk us all through like a moment of forgiveness, and I want you all to see the beauty and the power of it. And one of the things about forgiveness is forgiving yourself is one of the most challenging things in life, to forgive you. Anyone had a chance to forgive themselves? Was it easy? Did it happen like that same moment? Like, I forgive myself. Did it happen in that moment? Did it take some time? Okay, well, today, if you all don't mind standing up with me, we're going to have a moment of forgiveness. We're not only going to forgive ourselves if you haven't already, but you're also going to take a time to even forgive individuals who have hurt you as well, and it has caused those different traumas. Is that okay? All right. So I'm going to just I'm going to say each statement. If you don't mind just repeating it after me. The first one is, today I let go of my past and embrace my present and my future. My name isn't trauma. Y'all ain't saying like y'all mean that though. Let's say that one more time. My name isn't trauma. Okay, one more time. My name isn't trauma. My name isn't trauma. All right, now y'all mean that. Okay. And I disassociate myself from every traumatic situation in their memories. I disassociate myself from every traumatic situation in their memories. Today I forgive myself. Today I forgive myself. Today I forgive myself and others. No longer will I rehearse. No longer will I rehearse. No longer will I rehearse old memories of trauma. Old memories of trauma. Today, I take my name back. Today, I take my name back. Today, I take my name back. And I reclaim my identity. I reclaim my identity. I reclaim my identity. My name isn't trauma. My name isn't trauma. One more time, my name isn't trauma. The last part is, you're going to say my name is, and whatever your name is, I want you to say it as loud as you can. My name is, say your name. My name is Marika. What's your name? My name is Marika. What's your name? My name is Marika. What's your name? All right, y'all. How y'all feeling? Y'all feeling good? Y'all forgave yourselves. You forgave others. You disassociated yourself from past traumas in their memories. And you reclaimed your identity in your name. How powerful is that? Now that's all great. We declared a thing, but now we have to do something differently, right? We have to respond to trauma differently. We've been given different tools. Y'all can sit down, sorry. Y'all, we have been given different tools and techniques on what we can do when trauma tries to arise in our lives. And so the last portion of what I did last month, as you all can obviously tell, I'm a woman of God first. My calling is a therapist in the community. And I want to allow an opportunity, if you all want to sit where you are, have your own moment, reflect, speak to the Lord, however you feel to connect in your own healing process. Or if you want to come down and meet me down at the altar, I will pray with you. Others may pray with you as well. Pastor Brian, I don't know if you want to come up and share anything, but I do want to make note before we move any further. Next month, November 6th is our next healing gathering. Tell someone, share this information. It's free to attend. It's here, 4 p.m. It's on the first Saturday of the month. And the theme is trauma doesn't have my voice, and it's for the youth. Adults can come, but please bring these youth. Please. My daughter, Naima, stand up. That's my baby. My one and only child. But she's going to help me co-facilitate, because I believe that it's so much power when the young people can speak to each other. It's power when you can speak to your peer. So she's going to be on the stage assistant. There's going to be some other individuals on the panel as well, but please bring your young people. And then again in December 4th, we'll be here again, and we're going to be discussing grief. As I said in the beginning, it's not just about the loss of a loved one, but grief can have so many different forms. It could be a loss of a relationship, a loss of a job, a loss of you name it. But we're going to be addressing that on December 4th. And the thing for that one is the silent cries of trauma, because trauma has a sound even when you don't open up your mouth. So, again, I'll be down here if you wanted to pray or connect or what have you. Pastor Brian, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. All right, well, that's all I have for you all. So I'll be down here, and join me if you would like to, or sit down if you like to as well. Thank you.